Namaste to all of you. Dear participants, a very good evening and hearty welcome to you for the fifth day session entitled Teaching and Learning Process by Ms. Satyavani, Associate Professor of English, University of Jeddah, KSA. We hope that you have been benefited from the four sessions held until now. This one will be much more interesting in grabbing your attention. Through the current strange, horrendous pandemic era, though it has locked us from physical scholarly communication, it has extended variegated virtual platforms of seat of knowledge. This is one of such illustrations. It gives me immense pleasure in introducing to you today's speaker, Ms. Satyavani, Associate Professor of English, University of Jeddah, KSA. To her credentials, she has nearly 26 years of experience in teaching and administration. She is a member of CELTA Teaching Group. She has been working in the University of Jeddah since 2013. Before this assignment in Saudi Arabia, she taught in India, Oman, and Libya. She has certification in Cambridge teacher training and trains the young Saudi teacher training graduates. She is a member of Curriculum Development Committee along with the faculty from the USA, Canada, UK, New Zealand, South Africa, and the Middle East. Ms. Satyavani's interests include research, edutech teacher training, and professional development. Madam, the entire floor is yours now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Surender. Thank you all the English department, Vidya Jyoti Institute of Technology for giving me this opportunity. Special thanks to Dr. Priyadarshini who is after me to do this task. Okay, so now before starting, I would like to tell you about my session today, teaching and learning process. Good teachers nurture their knowledge and skills through constant and deliberate efforts. One of the prerequisites to be good teacher is to understand the teaching learning process in more depth. This facilitates better appreciation of the teaching profession as well as the process of imparting education. So before sharing my screen, I would I would like to talk about the teaching learning process. So, are you able to see my screen, Mr. Surender?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let me make it bigger. One second. Okay. Teaching and learning process. Okay.
Yeah, ma'am, it's clear now.
Yeah. Teaching and learning process. Let me start the first thing. Learning is the process of acquiring new understanding, knowledge, behaviors, skills, values, attitudes, and preferences. Some learning is immediate, induced by a single event, but much skill and knowledge accumulates from repeated experiences. So, before going deep into the session, I would like to share the contents of my presentation. So, introduction, definitions of items related to teaching and learning, 7 principles of effective teaching and learning process, principles of learning, aspects of teaching learning process, teaching learning system, educational spiral, how it is implemented in higher education, and finally, the summary. These are the things that we are going to discuss in our presentation. So, what are the outcomes of learning outcomes? Define, identify, list, notice, recognize, and discuss. Shall we start explaining the outcomes? Define teaching, learning, and teaching learning process. Identify 7 principles of effective education. and list principles of learning, notice teaching and learning aspects, recognize teaching learning system, and the final point in learning outcomes is discuss educational spiral. We will move to the next point, introduction. We will go deep into the session. So, the old ways of teaching learning is teacher centered, too much, too rigid, too much involvement, technically free. But now, teaching learning process is consists of basic elements. These four basic elements like assessment, planning, implementation, and evaluation. These are the four basic elements. So we will discuss these points in detail. What is meant by assessment? In education, the term assessment refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or educational needs of the students. Then coming to the another point, planning. Educational planning can be defined as the process of setting out in advance strategies, policies, procedures, programs, and standards through which an educational objective can be achieved. Then comes the implementation. According to Mittal, implementation is generally defined as a specified set of planned and intentional activities designed to integrate evidence-based practice into real-world settings. The final point is evaluation. Evaluation is the collection of analysis and interpretation of information about any aspect of program of education or training as part of a recognized process of judging its effectiveness, its efficiency, and another outcomes of it may have. These are the four aspects that are more important in teaching learning process. Let's move to the next point. So, definitions related to teaching learning process. Teaching learning process, learning, teaching, domains, and curriculum. Let's define these terms, teaching learning process. Teaching learning process, it is the most powerful instrument of education about desired changes in the students. If we want to bring desired changes, we must use the teaching learning process technique. Then moving to the learning. Learning can be defined as the relatively permanent change in an individual behavior that can occur at any time or place of consciously. The process of teaching, learning aims at transmission of knowledge, imparting skills, and formation of attitudes, values, and behavior. Moving to the next point, teaching. It is deliberate intervention that involves the planning and implementation of instructional activities and experiences to meet intended learner outcomes according to a teaching plan. So now moving to the domains. What are the domains? It is an area of control or sphere of knowledge. This is the domain. The last point is curriculum. It refers to a course of study at school, university, and the subject of a course. These are the definitions related to teaching learning process. Moving to the next one. There are 7 principles of effective teaching and learning process. First point is to encourage student-faculty contact. So it is our responsibility, being a teacher, we must develop the contact with the students to break the ice. The next principle is to develop cooperation among students. So being a teacher, we must develop the contacts of students and cooperation among the students so that they can work in a group or team to achieve their targets. To improve active learning. Active learning is very, very important in effective and teaching learning process. If they are not active, they cannot reach their goals. Next, to give prompt feedback. Being a teacher, we should give prompt feedback to the task, whatever they have done. Without feedback, they cannot change their mistakes. Next principle is to emphasize time on task. When we are giving a task to the students, to see that we should give a time limit. So, knowing the thing is different and doing the thing in a time limit is very, very important. Okay, this will help them to write the entrance exams or competitive exams. To communicate high expectations. When we are communicating with the learners, you should expect things in a high and aim high manner. To the last point in principles of effective teaching and learning process is to respect diverse talents and ways of learning. So in our class, we have multiple talents and different talented students. So we must respect each and everyone. Some students will learn in a quick manner. Some students will be slower learners. So we must respect each and everyone. So these are the 7 principles of effective teaching and learning process. So principles of learning. Moving to the principles of learning. There are 10 points in this: focusing, organization, repetition, association, learner control, imitation, active participation, motivation, individual styles, spacing. Okay, so let us discuss each point in a detailed manner. Focusing. A learning focused model is a framework for planning exemplary lessons. It incorporates specific steps and strategies for teachers and administrators to use that result in high standard student achievement. So students should focus on the thing, whatever they are doing. It will help the organizers and the administrators or the teachers. So moving to the next point, organization. It refers to use the resources of time, space, and personnel for maximum effect on student learning. Repetition. Repetition is essential for all students regardless of their ability or age. Repetition activity is very, very important. Whether you know the subject or not, practice makes man perfect. Association. The purpose of association is to provide members with a way to participate and be involved in supporting the college where you are studying. Learner control. It means that learners make their own decisions regarding the sequence, pace, flow, amount, and review of instruction. Imitation. So imitation is simplest terms. It means to copy the action of others. So students imitate a lot their teacher. So a student learns largely through imitation from teachers. So we should keep ourselves as a role model to the students. Active participation. Active participation is the keys to successful teaching and learning. It increases the rate and degree of learning. The student should actively participate. Motivation. As long as the student chooses goals and extends a certain amount of effort to achieve them, he is by definition motivated. So if the students keep for themselves the goals and the targets, and if they keep a plan to achieve their goals, they by themselves are motivated. Individual styles. Individual learning styles depend on cognitive, emotional, and environmental factors as well as one's prior experience. So individual difference are different from one to one. It depends mostly on their previous experiences. The last point in principles of learning is space. Spaced learning is a learning method in which highly condensed learning content is repeated 3 times with 2-minute breaks during which physical distractor activities are performed. We need space while studying. So you cannot concentrate more at a time. So we need a break. Let's move to the next point in teaching learning process. Aspects of teaching learning process. It, it is informative to examine the ideal teaching learning process as proposed by Diana Lauren. So she argues that there are 4 aspects of teaching learning process. She argues that there are 4 aspects of teaching learning process. They are discussion, interaction, adaptation, and reflection. Let us discuss one by one. Discussion. Discussion between teacher and the learner. There should be always a discussion between the teacher and learner to master the subject. Interaction. Interaction between the learner and some aspects of the world defined by the teacher. Adaptation. Adaptation of the world by the teacher and action by the learner. The last aspect of teaching a learning process is reflection. Reflection on the learner's performance by both teacher and the learner. These are the 4 aspects of learning process: discussion, interaction, and adaptation and reflection. Let's move to the next point. Teaching learning system. This is a system, is a purposeful, complex, and composite of interdependent interacting parts. There are 3 parts in teaching learning systems. The first one is the parts come together to form a whole. The parts are dependent on each other. The parts are interactive. These are the main 3 points in teaching learning system. Let's move to the next slide. Educational spiral. Educational spiral, it is a teaching method based on the premise that a student learns more about subject each time the topic is reviewed or encountered. Whenever a student encounters the topic, the student expands their knowledge or improves their skill. So this is about educational spiral, but the basic 4 elements are assessment, planning, implementing, and evaluating. Let's discuss each point. Assessment. The overall goal of each assessment is to get a better understanding of the candidates. This can be obtained by testing how a person responds and performs in different situations. This is the educational objective of assessment. Then planning for implementing and evaluating an educational program. We should prepare the draft of education plan or determine the best of the alternative. So we should have a plan for the educational process. Then comes the implementing an educational program. High quality of implementation of educational approaches can have a significant impact on improving students' outcomes. The last point is evaluating educational program. Evaluating educational program looks at the parameters, needs, components, and outcomes of program designed with an eye towards improving student learning. These are the 4 points in educational spiral method. Let's move to the next point. How it is implemented in higher education. The 9 points are higher order thinking skills, Moving from secondary education to higher education, teacher-centered learning, student-centered learning, do's and don'ts, individual learning facilitation, individual learning climate, individual learning feedback, fostering team learning. Now, we will discuss each point in detail in implementing in higher education. Let's move to the first one. Higher order thinking skills. There are different thinking skills. Here we will go detail. Critical thinking. We have to develop critical thinking in the minds of the students. Activities like big paper, building a silent conversation is most important in critical thinking. The next one is reflective thinking. It helps learners to develop higher order thinking by prompting new knowledge to prior understanding. This is what reflective thinking means. Complex thinking. It involves content that is abstract or complex. Next one is analytical thinking. This is the ability to deconstruct information into small categories. Dialectical thinking, ability to view issues from multiple perspectives. We have to develop all these thinking skills in the minds of the learners. Then moving to the creative thinking, the skills are indispensable for all professionals looking at things in new ways with solutions. Ethical thinking. We need to constantly learn in order to stay ethical. Problem solving, the ability to find solutions to difficult or complex issues. Evaluating and decision making. Evaluating outcomes may help the decision maker learn lessons that will improve her or his decision making abilities. These are the thinking and making skills in higher order thinking skills. So higher order thinking skills is a concept of education reform based on Bloom's taxonomy. Some steps of bearing require more cognitive processing than others, but also have more generalized benefits. Let's move to the next point. Moving from secondary education to higher education. This is where we are standing more important, being the engineering college faculty members. So the first point is focus on employability. Those who are coming entered into the higher education, whether it is engineering or medical or whatever it is, professional education, they focus more on the employability. Reducing power distance in teaching learning process. Focus on HOTS, higher order thinking skills. That is what we discussed in the previous slide. Focus on facilitation of learning. This is where the students are encouraged to take more control of their learning process. Focus on facilitation. Focus on self-learning and lifelong learning. Here in higher education, we have to focus on self-learning and lifelong learning. Self-learning means independent learning. Okay, focus on being and doing. We want to achieve the goals, to lead better, to reach further. We want to improve. So this is what the being and doing. Peer learning, it refers to situations where peers support each other in learning process. The final one is creating global and holistic mindset. It is the ability to reflexively adjust to the cultural signals you receive. This is what we have to create in the minds of the learners, creating global and holistic, wherever, which country, wherever they move, for the further education, they should create this act. So let's move to the next point, teacher-centered learning. The onus of learning is on the teacher rather than on the students. Higher education, here the lecturer comes to the class and delivers the lecture and goes. It is the responsibility of the student to go behind him, to collect the information, to discuss, maintain the contact. This is what the student's responsibility. Teacher has full control over teaching, learning process and classroom. Focus on delivery of content. Here the teacher focuses more on delivery of the content. Lecture as the predominant pedagogical tool. Here in this higher education, focus is on the pedagogical tool. Punishment for non-learning. So here for the students, there will be punishment. Punishment means they when they are unable to submit the targets, or when they are unable to do the task, there should be punishment for them. Concern for covering the syllabus instead of uncovering the insights. Individual learning. These are the teacher-centered learning process. Moving to the next one. Student-centered learning. Onus of learning is on the student rather than on the teacher. Here, the student's activity is more rather than on the teacher. Here, he has to learn more by himself. Instructor acts as a facilitator. Focus on learning and learning to learn. Experiential learning with focus on high engagement is the main pedagogical tool. Lecture is the supplementary tool. So here the student focus on engagement and doing the task rather than depending on the lecture. Focus on vital aspects of contents, peer-to-peer learning, avenues and opportunities for interaction with faculty outside the classroom. Outside the classroom, you should develop the interaction with the faculty and take the opportunities to show your understanding of the content. Let's move to the next part. Do's and don'ts. Measurement of previous learning. When you are taking the first task, first class in the for the first years, for example, you should measure the previous learning, how far they have, and the profile of students. Before going to the class, you should see the profile of the students. Pre-read, pre-class group discussion. Before taking the new chapter, better discuss with the pre-class. Testing of pre-read. So the day where when you are taking the new chapter, test whether they have pre-read that chapter or not. And scaffolding. This activity is very important. Scaffolding activity. Multiplicity of experiential learning to techniques. Experience to learning. So what are the don'ts? Long lecture. So if you give a long lecture to the students, they cannot understand. So after listening to 30 minutes, the mind becomes passive. Poor involvement of students. If the students' involvement is less, the class will be dull. Pampering the students, too much pampering the students is very negative activity. Navel gazing, don't go very deep into their students. Information sharing, we they attitude, traditional assessment of learning, don't go for the traditional assessment of learning. Poor sharing of methods, and leaving everything to students. Do it by yourself, do it by yourself, don't do this. These are the do's and don'ts. Moving to the next point. Individual learning facilitation. So be interested and enthusiastic about your subject. Demonstrate its importance to students. Being the teacher, you should be very enthusiastic and active, and demonstrate the importance to the students, the topic of the study. Use less of lecture, more of simulations, exercises, and cases. So use less part of speaking lecture and give more practice to the students. Use various student involvement techniques. So involve them in different techniques, not the traditional techniques. Show that you care for students and they are of great importance to you. To see that you should always show that you care a lot for the students and you are there for any time for them. Use variations in facilitation, great power distance, lesser participation, and here the teacher should act as a facilitator. Finally, you should be a role model to your students. So on seeing you, they should get confidence. So moving to the next point, individual learning climate. Clarification of expectations from students. So when you are clarifying their doubts, you should see that you have cleared everything to them. Encouragement for participation. You should see that the students, when they are participating in activity, you should give encouragement to them. Reward for asking questions. Don't discourage them. So when they are asking questions, reward for asking questions. Co-creating class norms for student behavior, attentive listening to students. When they are asking questions, don't be absent-minded and be attentive in listening to the students. Maintaining poise in emotive situations. So let's train them how to work on high-stress situations. Sense of humor, it is the most important thing. So if you use sense of humor, it will make your class very lively. So moving to the next point, individual learning feedback. Continual and detailed feedback, not grades. Every time don't give feedback and don't use grades like 10 by 10 or 9 by 10 like this. Analytical feedback on written work. When they have done a project work and they have submitted to you, analyze the points one by one, using both positive and negative feedback. So don't give only positive or don't give only negative. Explain the points in an analytical manner, and don't give only negative comments or don't give only positive comments. Discuss feedback if required. So if it is required, discuss the feedback like why you have given that comment. Okay, it will make them more confident. Encourage continuous improvement. So discuss with them how they are in the beginning of the class and how they are at the end of the semester. So this shows their improvement. Give students model answers. When you are giving a questionnaire, give them model answers so that they will follow the model answers. Tell students about the best answer and poor answer. When they have submitted the answers to you, show them which is the best answer. This is the way you have to write in the examination. So seek feedback about feedback. So the feedback, whatever you have given, take the feedback from the students, how they have followed. Moving to the next point. Fostering team learning. Fostering developing team learning, which is very, very important in higher education. Recognize that team learning is as important as individual learning because they are, after completing their professional course, they are going to work in a team or group to, they have to respond to their team leader. Next point is create group learning opportunities such as group presentations. So here, this will create even the nervousness among the students will be taken away. Even the slow learner also will participate actively. Use engagement techniques that are group activity based, such as think, pair, and share here. Encourage dialogue and discussion in the class. So for this activity, we can use debates and group discussions such as, okay. So use model, check whether students are learning in their study groups. So when you have given them a group activity, Take a round around the class and check whether the students are working in the group study groups or not. And the final point is use Moodle for collaborative learning. Yesterday, the resource person elaborated more on the importance of Moodle in the present scenario. Moving to the next point. That is the last slide of my presentation, the take home message. Learning is brought about through teaching. Teaching process is the arrangement of environment within which the students can interact and study how to learn. The process of teaching learning aims at transmission of knowledge, imparting skills, and formation of attitudes, values, and behavior. Finally, the take home message, the three steps in teaching learning process are: pre-active phase refers to planning, interactive phase refers to the conduct and management, post-active phase refers to the follow-up and consolidation. These are the three important points in teaching learning process. At the end of my session, this is the take home message of my presentation. Moving to the next one. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much, one and all, Dr. Pridarshini and the whole English department of Vidya Jyoti Institute of Technology. Thank you once again. Mr. Shafi.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful talk on the topic of feeling, thoughts, and behavior are the monitoring aspects in teacher and student relationship. It's the responsibility of the teacher to imbibe knowledge in the students and see that they reach highest peaks of career. It's also the responsibility of the students in engaging themselves for prosperous growth. We have the two dimensions, teacher and student-centered methodologies. It's a teacher who has to decide and update himself or herself and understand the drawbacks and merits of them and use them according to the context. Thank you, madam, for exploring the complexities of teaching and learning process.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'm leaving because I have a meeting. Okay.
A couple of questions, ma'am, would help us in going for that.
But I don't have time. I'm
Uh,
already called by my team. Okay. Thank you so
one,
much. Thank you so much.
yeah, so I request the audience to post the questions on the chat box, which will be giving to you. So that will be mailing to ma'am. And so, okay, ma'am. So, madam, please wait for a while, for a second. Yeah. We sincerely appreciate you, madam, for accepting our invitation for our program and sparing your valuable time with us. The topic for discussion has extended new horizons of exploring the arena of pedagogical practices. We are indebted to our esteemed chairman, Palla Rajesh sir, directors, I have already sir, principal Padmaja madam, head of the department, Rajendra sir, for providing us a wonderful platform. Due regards to the convener, Dr. Priyadarshini, for her initiative and all my fellow colleagues of English department. Last and very important, my team members, Sujata madam, Shefi sir, and Sushil sir, for extending support. Special thanks to the participants for reserving time for the program. We, the Department of English, Vijayati, seek your feedback in improvising us for betterment. Please see that feedback is posted. Uh, Shafi sir, please post the feedback link. Shafi sir, are you able to listen to me?
Yes, sir. Feedback link is posted in both Zoom as well as in YouTube.
YouTube. Thank you. So let the feedback link will stay for about 15 minutes. So I request the participants to fill the feedback as they are very important for you. Madam has suddenly Madam has got an appointment with the dean of our college, so she couldn't engage yourself for the question hour session. So please pose your questions. I will be enabling the chat box, and please pose your questions on the YouTube as well as on Zoom, so that we'll pose your questions to Madam. We'll mail the questions to Madam so that she'll be answering you on that.
2 minutes of time is given to the participants to fill the feedback form available in chat box for both YouTube and Zoom viewers.
So participants, please see that the feedback link is only available for 2 minutes. So utilize the time to fill the feedback.
Dear participants, due to time constraint, Varanasi Satyavani ma'am should leave early, was supposed to leave early, but the questions will be answered through email. Her email is posted in the chat box, varanasi.satyavani@gmail.com. Please post the questions to her personal email, varanasi.satyavani@gmail.com. Okay, thank you very much. You can see her Gmail. Please post the questions, queries, if any, to her personal mail. Your questions will be answered. varanasi.satyavani@gmail.com. Thank you.
Tomorrow session.
Participants, please understand that tomorrow's session is very important for you. So please attend the session. We see your participation is very important. So tomorrow is the last session, and there will be also valedictory session followed by the speaker's talk. So please see that you attend tomorrow's session without fail. So this is a sincere request from our side. We really appreciate the days which you have shown, the interest which you have shown all these days. Hope that tomorrow also you'll show such interest, but we hope that there will be 100% of participation from your side. Thank you, and a good night to all of you.